I have been married to my husband Ethan for 7 long years. To everyone who knows us, Ethan is the absolute definition of a saint. He is a prominent paediatric surgeon at the city's top hospital, deeply respected by his colleagues, loved by his patients, and an incredibly attentive partner to me. He is the kind of man who remembers every anniversary, brings me flowers for no reason, and listens to me talk for hours after a stressful day. When my father passed away 4 years ago, it felt like my entire world had collapsed. My father left me a substantial inheritance, which included a beautiful, completely isolated lake cabin in upstate New York. It was a rustic, peaceful place surrounded by dense woods, miles away from the nearest neighbor. Because of the heavy emotional grief, I couldn't bring myself to visit the place. Ethan, being the supportive husband he always was, suggested we keep it exactly as it was. He said it was a sacred sanctuary for my family's memories and that we should never sell it. He generously volunteered to drive up there alone every alternate weekend to handle the heavy maintenance, winterize the pipes during the freezing months, cut the overgrown grass, and keep the property secure from trespassers. I always felt a deep, overwhelming wave of gratitude for how much he cared about my mental health and my family's legacy. I truly believed I was the luckiest woman on earth. But 3 days ago, everything changed. I decided to surprise him. He had left for the cabin on Friday morning, and by Saturday afternoon, I missed him so much that I packed a small overnight bag, threw it into the passenger seat, and drove up the winding mountain roads to join him. When I finally arrived around dusk, his truck was parked in the gravel driveway, but the cabin itself was completely pitch black. No lights were on. I let myself in using my spare key, calling out his name, but the house was dead silent. Ethan wasn't there. As I walked into the kitchen, I noticed he had left his iPad on the table. It was unlocked, the screen glowing softly in the dark room, and it was connected to the cabin's local private server. Out of pure curiosity, I walked over and looked at the screen. I clicked on a hidden folder hidden deep inside the system directories titled Inspections. What I found inside that folder didn't just end my marriage, it turned my entire existence into a living nightmare. My husband is not a surgeon spending his weekends fixing a roof. He is someone else entirely. And right now, as I stand frozen in the dark, I can hear the heavy thud of his boots walking up the wooden steps of the front porch. Here is the terrifying truth about the man I share a bed with. Let's go back to the exact moment I opened that hidden folder on his iPad. I expected to see standard blueprints, invoices for lumber, or maybe photos of the leaking roof Ethan always complained about to explain his long hours away. Instead, my eyes adjusted to see 4 live, high-definition camera feeds streaming in real time. I stared at the screen, utterly confused. The camera angles didn't show the cabin or the surrounding woods. They showed a modern, completely soundproofed underground basement apartment. It had a small, fully functional kitchen, a neatly made bed, a small living area with a television, but absolutely no windows. The walls were thick concrete. It looked like a luxury survival bunker built deep into the earth. As I watched the monitor in absolute disbelief, a woman walked into the frame of camera number 2. She looked to be in her early 30s, wearing casual grey sweatpants, holding a paperback book. She looked completely at ease, casually sipping tea from a ceramic mug. Then, the camera angle shifted slightly as a door opened and someone entered the room. It was Ethan. He was carrying a large plastic bag full of fresh groceries. He smiled warmly, walked over to her, kissed her gently on the forehead, and they sat down at the small table to have dinner together. My chest went completely numb, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. My immediate thought was that I was witnessing a highly sophisticated, high-tech, secret affair. I thought my wealthy husband had used my money to build a secret love nest somewhere and was keeping a second family completely hidden from me. But as I kept watching, I noticed a tiny microphone icon on the interface. I put on my headphones, my hands shaking so violently I could barely plug them into the audio jack. I turned up the volume and the audio feed kicked in. I heard the woman's voice through the static. She said, "Did you manage to bring the new medication, Ethan? The headaches are getting worse, and I can't seem to remember what happened last Tuesday." Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out a brown prescription bottle, and replied in his usual calm, soothing doctor's voice, "I did, Sarah. But remember what the specialist said before the terrible accident. Your brain needs complete, absolute isolation from the outside world to fully recover. No internet, no phones, no news. The city is still far too dangerous for you after what happened to your family. You have to trust me." The woman, Sarah, nodded submissively, looking at him with pure adoration. "I know," she whispered. "I don't know what I would do without you. You're the only person who survived that night to save me." Hearing those exact words made my blood run cold. Sarah wasn't his mistress. I knew exactly who Sarah was. 7 years ago, before Ethan and I ever met, he was engaged to a woman named Sarah. The local news had reported that Sarah and her elderly parents died in a catastrophic, suspicious house fire right before their wedding day. Ethan was celebrated as a tragic, grieving hero who tried to run into the flames to save them. But looking at this screen, Sarah wasn't a ghost. She was alive, living underground beneath my feet. I sat there in the dark kitchen for what felt like an eternity, the audio loop of their conversation echoing in my headphones over and over again. My mind was racing, trying to connect the dots of a horror story I was suddenly trapped inside of. I began frantically searching through the other directories on the iPad server. It turned out this server wasn't communicating with a distant location in another city or state. The local IP address matched the secondary electrical grid of my father's cabin. This secret bunker wasn't miles away. It was directly beneath me, built into the old historic storm cellar under the large cabin barn that my father had abandoned and boarded up decades ago. Ethan had systematically used my inheritance money, my family's private land, and his medical knowledge to imprison a woman the entire world thought was nothing but ashes. As I dug deeper into the encrypted documents, I found digital copies of medical records, forged death certificates, and psychological tracking files. Ethan had been utilizing his access to hospital pharmaceuticals to drug her with heavy, customized sedatives. These drugs induced severe anterograde amnesia, meaning her brain was chemically blocked from forming new long-term memories. Every few weeks, her mind would completely reset, forgetting the passage of time. Ethan would then enter the bunker, put on his act, and re-explain the fake accident to her, ensuring she remained terrified of the outside world and entirely dependent on him forever. The dark truth of why he did it was laid out in his personal digital journals. 7 years ago, right before their planned wedding, Sarah had discovered that Ethan was falsifying medical trials at his hospital, causing the deaths of several patients for pharmaceutical payouts. She was going to report him to the medical board. Instead of letting his brilliant career be ruined, he orchestrated the horrific fire that killed her parents, drugged her, faked her death, and hid her away where nobody would ever look. Then, a year later, he met me, the wealthy daughter of a real estate mogul, and used my emotional vulnerability after my father's death to secure my wealth, fund his secret prison, and use our perfect marriage as the ultimate social camouflage. I wasn't his beloved wife. I was his ultimate shield. I was the financial engine and the innocent cover story that kept his secret underground world running without a single whisper of suspicion. As I finished reading the last line of his journal entry, the old wooden floorboards of the cabin suddenly groaned under a heavy weight. I snapped my head toward the window. The headlights of his truck were completely turned off, but the driver's side door was wide open. He was already walking toward the front door. He didn't know I was here. If he walked through that door and saw me holding this iPad, I knew with absolute certainty that I would never leave these woods alive. I didn't let panic take over. My own medical training taught me that when your adrenaline spikes, you must become cold, precise, and calculating. I carefully placed the iPad exactly where it was on the kitchen table, ensuring it looked untouched. I slipped out through the low back window of the cabin, dropping quietly into the damp grass, and ran into the dark tree line of the forest. Hiding within the thick shadows of the pine trees, I watched through the window. I saw Ethan enter the cabin, smiling, but within seconds his eyes landed on the kitchen table. I watched his face instantly morph from his usual calm demeanor into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He realized someone had been there. He grabbed a heavy flashlight and a crowbar from his truck and started charging toward the old barn. He thought I was down there, or that I was hiding inside the structure. The very moment he stepped into the barn and opened the heavy hidden steel hatch to descend into the bunker, I broke into a full sprint toward my car. I didn't just drive away. First, I pulled out my phone and opened the smart home automation app that my father had installed years ago to secure the cabin boundaries. With 2 taps on my screen, I remotely activated the heavy industrial security locks on the barn. The thick, reinforced steel shutters slammed down over the windows and doors, locking him completely inside his own perimeter. He was trapped in the very cage he had built. As I sped down the mountain highway, I dialed 911 and demanded to be connected directly to the State Police Counter-Terrorism Unit and the FBI. While driving with one hand, I used the other to transmit the entire cloud backup link of the iPad server, which I had safely synced to my personal phone before jumping out that cabin window. I am currently writing this from a secure hotel room 2 hours away, guarded by 2 local officers. The state police and federal agents have already completely surrounded the property. They breached the bunker, rescued Sarah, and she is currently being transported to a specialized medical facility to safely detox from the drugs Ethan gave her. Ethan was arrested on site, dragged out in handcuffs while screaming my name, realizing his 7-year empire of lies had completely shattered. But the horror doesn't stop there. My divorce lawyer just called me from the precinct. When the FBI forensic team searched Ethan's primary office at our city home, they found another hidden encrypted server. And this one doesn't have just one folder for Sarah. It has 3 other folders, each labeled with different names of women who went missing over the last decade. I am going to the federal station tomorrow morning to see exactly who else my husband has been protecting. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have stayed to confront him, or did I do the right thing by locking him in his own twisted trap? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for part 2, because the moment the FBI cracks open those other 3 folders, I am going to share every single detail with you. Stay safe out there, and don't trust the perfect smiles.